Hello and welcome to another Magic Duels gameplay. Today we're taking a look at a very spicy 4-color Reanimator deck. So let's dive right into it here. So the goal of the deck is to get giant expensive creatures in play as early as turn 4, usually turn 5. And the way we do that is by casting these reanimation spells. One is a Necromantic Summons and the other one is a Rise from the Grave. And these allow us to get these creatures back from the graveyard into play. So of course we need to get all these expensive creatures in the graveyard in the first place, and that's where some of the new cards come in. We've got a Brilliant Spectrum with Converge, which allows us to draw up to 4 cards and then discard 2 cards, so we can just use the discard mode here to get rid of some of those creatures and put them in the graveyard. And then the following turn, on turn 5, we can cast one of our 6 reanimation spells and get the party started. So in order to make the deck somewhat consistent, we have a lot of card draw going on in the early game with Read the Bones and Telling Time and some other stuff along the way. So yeah, let's get started here with our 1-drops. We have 1 copy of Salvage Drone, which sort of acts as an early blocker, but his ability when he dies is actually quite useful, because when he dies we get to draw a card and then discard a card, so we can get rid of one of those creatures and put them in the graveyard. And of course when we play one of our 3 sweepers, we can also just kill the Salvage Drone to let him die and get the trigger here. So that's what the Salvage Drone is doing in the deck. Then we also have a Jace, Vryn's Prodigy, which is awesome in this deck since his ability to loot allows us to discard our cards easily, and then once he transforms into Telepath Unbound, we can flash back our reanimation spells, so we can use them multiple times. So Jace is one of the better cards in the deck for sure. Then we also have a few copies of Carrier Thrall, which is just in the deck to help out against the aggressive decks. It's a blocker that then makes another blocker, and we can also use the Scion token to cast our reanimation spells a turn sooner. So this is what allows our turn 4 reanimation spells. So if we get to discard one of our cards with a Jace or maybe with a Salvage Drone and then get a Scion token, we could cast our reanimation spells on turn 4 already. Then we also have Telling Time for some more card selection. Make sure we either hit land drops, find our ways to discard our big creatures, or find our reanimation spells. We also have a Pilgrim's Eye as an early blocker and also a way to find our off-color basic lands in order to power up our Converge card, because we would like to draw as many cards as possible with the Brilliant Spectrum, but we'll get to that in a second. Then we also have a Read the Bones, 3 mana, scry 2, draw 2, so a lot of card selection. We do lose 2 life, so I'm not going with the full 4 copies, because otherwise we're taking a lot of damage against the aggressive decks. We also have the full 4 copies of Brilliant Spectrum, since this is kind of the build-around card in the deck. So we are playing some off-color lands in order to get as much Converge going as possible, so we can draw up to 4 cards and then discard 2. Then we also have some sweepers here to buy some time against aggressive decks, 2 Languish, and then the little brother Rising Miasma, which we could also awaken, but we're probably not gonna get there. And then we also have a copy of Bitter Revelation, which is similar to Read the Bones, but this also allows us to put cards in the graveyard. So we look at the top 4, 2 go in hand, 2 go in the graveyard. So if the ones that go in the graveyard are those large creatures, it's kind of doing 2 things at the same time, which is nice. But we also lose 2 life, and it's a 4-drop, so we don't want to have too many of these. Then of course we have our 6 reanimation spells. Necromantic Summons is clearly the better one, since it also puts 2+1/+1 counters on the creature with a spell mastery. And both reanimation spells allow us to select either our graveyard or the opponent's graveyard, so that's pretty neat. And then Rise from the Grave, no counters, but the reanimated creature also becomes a zombie and becomes black. which could have small upsides if you're playing against someone with Crew Revival, because Crew Revival can't kill zombie creatures, so that's a minor upside, I guess. Then we get to our big finishers. Sire of STagnation is actually still quite castable at 6 mana, blue and black are our main colors, so we can just cast him on turn 6 and he's fine, or we can get him out a turn sooner with our reanimation spells, and of course the sooner you get him online the better, because then you get to draw more cards when the opponent's forced to play out his lands. We also have Alhammarret, which is also still quite castable at 7 mana, double blue, and this one is quite nice against, for example, the ramp decks, since you can name their big payoff card like Ulamog and they won't be able to cast the Ulamog, or you can just name their removal spell that they have in hand, so they can't kill the Alhammarret. Then we have 3 copies of Plated Crusher, which we can in no way cast in this deck, so we're only gonna reanimate him. But he's a 7/6 trample hexproof, so he protects himself, and the trample means that the opponent won't be able to just chump block him. And if we do reanimate the Plated Crusher with the Necromantic Summons, which puts the counters on him, then we have a 9/8 creature with trample and hexproof, which is pretty difficult to stop. Then we also have Omnath, which we also can't cast in this deck, but only reanimate. But this one is pretty sweet, since whenever we play a land we get a 5/5 elemental token, so usually it's correct to wait until we can reanimate the Omnath and play a land in the same turn, so we make sure that we get some value out of him in case the opponent kills him right away. And then of course whenever an elemental dies we get to deal 3 damage to target creature or player. Then we have some Eldrazi, which we can also reanimate, a Breaker of Armies, 10/8, that makes the opponent block with all his creatures, so kind of a removal spell, but only 1 copy here, since if you look at our other finishers here, Alhammarret protects himself with this ability, Plated Crusher has hexproof, we can get value right away with Omnath by playing a land and getting a token, while Breaker of Armies is good, but he doesn't gain you any value if the opponent just kills him right away, so that's why we're only playing 1 copy. And then of course we have Ulamog, which we won't get the cast trigger, so we won't get to exile 2 permanents, but it's still a 10/10 indestructible that mills the opponent for 20 whenever he attacks, so it's a pretty fast win condition, so if you can get Ulamog on turn 5, there's not many decks that can handle that. Then our mana base, which is pretty interesting, so we are base blue-black of course, 5 islands, 6 swamps. Then we have some off-color basics that we can grab with Pilgrim's Eye or with our Evolving Wilds. And then we have some other off-color duels here, Smoldering Marsh and Prairie Stream, so we make sure we have as many colors as possible, so we have green, red and white. And then of course 2 Sunken Hollow and the Catacomb and the full 4 Evolving Wilds. So that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which we can't keep with only 1 land. This one is fine. We have early Thrall and Pilgrim's Eye, which sets up our Spectrum nicely with already a target and a way to reanimate in hand. So let's lead with the Hollow. So we can go Island Thrall. If we don't draw another basic, we might even consider not playing the Thrall and just playing Prairie Stream, so we can make sure to cast the Pilgrim's Eye on 3. There's no creatures the Thrall has to block at the moment, so it might just be better to make sure that we can cast the Pilgrim's Eye next turn, rather than cast the Thrall this turn. And then the Pilgrim's Eye can get either a swamp or one of our off-color lands. If we get a swamp, we have 2 swamps. Well, there is our other swamp, so I think we just grab one of our off-color lands here. So either forest or mountain. Let's go with the forest, since we have more ways to draw a mountain or a red source. And then next turn we get to Spectrum for the full amount. SPHINX'S Tutelage, alright. So this will help us find more creatures in the graveyard, which is good for us. So let's hit for one. And we could consider even going double Carrier Thrall, kind of banking on our opponent hitting a creature, but that seems a little ambitious. So let's just go with the Spectrum for 4 here. And put Plated Crusher and Alhammarret in the graveyard. And next turn, I guess we'll discard Salvage Drone here. And next turn, plan on getting back one of those two, not sure which one yet. Didn't hit any other creatures. We do have to keep counter spells in mind since the, well, double SPHINX'S Tutelage instead. So we can freely reanimate a creature here. Now the question is which one? I think it might just be safer to go with the Crusher here, given the hexproof, and we can give it 2+1/+1 counters, which makes for a pretty fast clock. Also have a Pilgrim's Eye as protection against Flashback Marauder. So yeah, I think we just go with that one. And in blue-black there's not a lot of ways to get rid of the Crusher here. And then next turn we can play a bunch of Thralls as more flashback insurance. Opponent can't cast 2 flashbacks here. So looking pretty good here. Meanwhile our opponent milling us a bunch. Still didn't hit any other sweet creatures. I think the best our opponent can do is play a Death Touch creature, which would actually be able to trade with the Crusher. Instead it's a Salvage Drone, which is cute with the Tutelage, as it's another way to draw a card and trigger them. And a Jace, which is actually also pretty good with Tutelage. But we're just going to attack here. And try to kill the opponent as quickly as possible. Opponent blocks. Takes 9 total. So now we have to decide if we want to Rise from the Grave or Alhammarret, or if we want to play double Thrall. I think getting back Alhammarret is probably pretty good. Seems like the safest option. Yep, let's go for it. And our opponent has double Hydrolash, Nullifier, Talent, Possessed, so nothing that really worries us. Naming Talent of the Telepath also has the advantage of our opponent not being able to reanimate one of our creatures, which seems pretty good here. It's probably close between Talent and Hydrolash. Hydrolash probably buys our opponent a turn here. Maybe. Well, I guess our opponent can flash in the Nullifier to chump the Arbiter, and then also chump with Jace, but that seems fine. So let's go ahead and attack. Opponent's gonna flash in the Nullifier here. Nope, I'm gonna cast Hydrolash. And then chump with Jace, I guess. And then a mill with the Jace before he dies. Yeah, that actually works. And our opponent does still get a decent number of triggers here. But it looks like our opponent's had enough. So your opponent's not dead on board here. But I don't think our opponent can mill us for 20 here. Well, he's getting close at least. Let's play some more creatures as insurance. Not gonna play the Pilgrim's Eye because our opponent still has the Hydrolash, so it's not gonna do any more damage. And we also don't really want to fetch out another land. Does our opponent get super lucky here? That's 2, and that's another 2. Alright, our opponent is dead. Well, never mind, our opponent still got to hit a couple doubles, it looks like. But we're still at 7, and now we can just attack. Alright, on to the next one. Okay, let's take a look at our opener, which doesn't have any draw spells or ways to discard. So I think we have to try another hand. Alright, I like this one. We can grab Island with Evolving Wilds. But I think we lead off with... this is actually... Alright, this makes it easy. Otherwise our decision would have been a bit tricky, but here we can just play Evolving Wilds, which will grab a swamp. And then we get to play Carrier Thrall on turn 2, into Pilgrim's Eye, into Revelation, into Summons. Opponents on the Malakir Cullblade, which we don't really care about. So we're just gonna grab our swamp here. And we already have 4 colors for Converge, which is nice. Play Carrier Thrall, which will block the Malakir Cullblade if it attacks. Alright, Timberpack Wolf. So just a 2/2. It's actually interesting that the Cullblade is pretty decent against the Scion tokens, because if we sacrifice them, the Cullblade will get a +1/+1 counter. So we have to be a little careful. But so far our opponent can't really attack into our Thrall, which is doing a good job. Next turn we'll have a Pilgrim's Eye, which can also block, so we can buy a lot of time here. Play the Marsh or the Forest here in case we draw or Converge card next turn. We want to have all colors in play. And here it doesn't really matter. I think we just get a swamp. And gonna stay on defense here. So hopefully this Bitter Revelation will reveal some nice reanimation targets for Necromantic Summons. Liliana is not bad. So if your opponent attacks and we block, she will transform. But actually if she transforms and our opponent makes us discard a card, our opponent could be actually helping us. So here an attack for 2, I'm just gonna take it. It's not enough damage to chump with the Pilgrim's Eye, and I don't wanna trade because then Liliana transforms. And we actually did find one of our expensive cards. So here we probably just play our Bitter Revelation, which finds a Languish, which I like, and Brilliant Spectrum, putting Sire of STagnation in the graveyard. So next turn we could cast Brilliant Spectrum, putting Plated Crusher in the graveyard, or we can reanimate our Sire. Of course, we can also simply Languish away the board, which is not bad if our opponent plays another random creature here. Well, Acid Moss is probably gonna change our plans. Gets rid of our Smoldering Marsh, so now our Converge is down to 3. Rams the opponent. Even though his start didn't really look like a ramp deck, but maybe now everyone's playing the Acid Moss. So here, I think we just block to preserve our life total, since next turn we're gonna Languish. And don't want to block with the Thrall, because we want to keep the Scion once the Thrall dies, and we also don't want to transform Liliana. Alright, so here just go Swamp and a Languish, which is going to buy us a lot of time. Opponent with 2 cards left in hand, now down to nothing. And we still get a token. Alright. Seven lands for the opponent. It's gonna play a Graveblade Marauder, which has 3 creatures in the graveyard. And here, let's see, we have Spell Mastery is active. I think we just go for a Rise from the grave here and get back our Sire of Stagnation. And then next turn we can figure out a way to get the Crusher in the graveyard. The annoying thing is that this has Death Touch, so it can stay on defense, and the Hexproof won't matter. But getting the Sire online early means that our opponent playing lands gives us extra cards, which is nice. We also exiled a Winnower and a Forest. Winnower would have been good against our Sire. An Eldrazi zombie, that's pretty scary. Gets a land. And an attack we will just take. Could also chump, but I like having this Scion in place since it's protection against a Flashback Marauder. So let's see here. I think we Brilliant Spectrum. And don't want to get rid of our Scion token. So let's tap like this, Converge 3. Yep. And we can just discard these and play an Evolving Wilds, play Salvage Drone, and pass the turn. And this one will get our mountain. So opponent has land in hand plus an unknown card. Plays NISSA, which he has to play a land in order to transform, so we'll get to draw 2 more. So in response we should probably crack our Evolving Wilds, so we have more chance to draw spells instead of lands. Alright. So now we could just attack into the Marauder and then just get the Sire back. Or we can get back our Plated Crusher. Wild Size revealed with NISSA, so Death Touch plus Trample, something we need to keep in mind. And Let's see for opponent's attacks. He doesn't. So still land plus wild size in the opponent's hand. Now we have lots of mana available. I think we just attack the NISSA here with our Sire. Opponent likely blocks. Or maybe chumps with the GATECREEPER. Alright, and gonna cast a wild size, which is gonna save the Marauder, which is still fine. And now we are just gonna get him back. And I think we still go with the Rise from the Grave here. Get back Sire of STagnation. And can also play Carrier Thrall or cast Telling Time. I think we wanna cast Telling Time here. Also, if we ever find Languish, that's also pretty good since our Sire will survive. It's actually scary for the opponent to plus NISSA, because if he hits a land, we get to draw 2 cards. So it is kind of a gamble here. Finds a Swiftwing. Okay. We just want to make sure that NISSA doesn't ultimate and kill us. Opponent still plays a land here, not afraid of the card advantage. GATECREEPER Vine. So plays the Swiftwing. And probably no attacks. So let's cast Telling Time end of turn. And Miasma is not bad. So we'll keep this. And Brilliant Spectrum can also stay on top. Alright, so let's see here. We can cast our Miasma for 4. Probably should have used a Science since that one was gonna die anyways. Salvage Drone triggers. Get rid of, I think, the Pilgrim's Eye. Evolving Wilds could still be relevant if we want to reanimate the Omnath. Now we can pretty safely attack NISSA since Marauder has negative power, so Death Touch won't happen here. And opponent lets it happen. And if we didn't make the mistake there with our Scion token, we could have reanimated our Plated Crusher. Instead, I think we just play Evolving Wilds and Carrier Thrall, just so we have a blocker in case our opponent goes on the offensive, since he does have 6 creatures in the graveyard. Pass the turn. And now we just have to make sure that we can close out the game as quickly as possible. Opponent still plussing the NISSA, finds a land which will draw 2 cards. Also have to be careful that we don't deck ourselves here, since we're drawing a lot of cards. Timber Pack is fine. No attacks. Probably still gonna crack the Evolving Wilds here. Grab an island. Alright, so now we have to try and close out the game, maybe find Ulamog, maybe find Alhammarret. So I think we start off with a Brilliant Spectrum. 4/4. Alright, we found Omnath and Alhammarret. Maybe want to keep the Alhammarret since we have enough stuff in the graveyard already. Or we can reanimate Alhammarret this turn, which might be better than Omnath. Let's see. Yeah, probably just gonna reanimate Alhammarret this turn with Necromantic Summons. See what our opponent has in hand. Just 2 lands, alright. So now we have a creature that can kill the NISSA quite easily. No need to attack here. And we can just discard 2 lands. And then next turn we can reanimate Omnath, make a elemental token, and go from there. I think our opponent's best path to victory here is just trying to deck us by playing the Evolving Wilds, cracking it, and then let us draw a million cards. And I think our opponent is going for that. So we just have to start attacking here. Alright, Breaker of Armies is a nice one. So let's go ahead and 7, let's see, 7. Think we attack NISSA with Alhammarret still. And then our opponent with everyone else. And then 4, 4, 5. Alright, this is nice, so we don't have to be afraid of decking ourselves now. And alright, so now we can Necromantic Summons or Omnath. Could also go for Plated Crusher, I guess. But Omnath will make more power here. Play a land. And we can even Languish here, which will get rid of the Timberpack Wolves and still keep our elementals around. Discard a whole bunch of cards here. And I think we finally got there. Alright, Swiftwing is fine. Alright, let's go to combat. Deal 12. And I guess we might as well play out our Breaker of Armies. Pause the turn. So even Ulamog won't save our opponent. And now we can just attack for the win. Alright, it took us a little longer than expected due to the Death Touch here. But, well, when you draw your entire deck, you're pretty favored to win. Alright, on to the next one. Okay, let's take a look at our opener, which looks great. Turn 1 Evolving Wilds, get an island. Turn 2 Thrall, hopefully turn 3 Pilgrim's Eye to set up the Spectrum. Draw an Omnath. So let's pause a turn here, we can fetch end of turn. Also have the option of casting Telling Time if we're afraid of missing land drops. Let's grab our island here. So we'll go down to 19. But if we don't draw land, we could still play the Telling Time next turn to hit our third land. So I think it's still fine to play the Thrall here, which can also block the opposing Thrall. So opponent on green-black sacrifice. And we'll definitely block here. So now we have our third mana for Pilgrim's Eye. Alright, land is good, so no need to sacrifice the Scion just yet. Go land, Pilgrim's Eye, and I'm not sure if we are supposed to play around Acid Moss, but this doesn't really look like the deck that should play Acid Moss. So I think I'll just get our off-color land here to have an extra converge. So let's get the forest. And pass the turn, no need to attack. Fourth land. And I'm just going to block the Scion token with Pilgrim's Eye here. And no play from the opponent, interesting. We draw Alhammarret, we're just going to Brilliant Spectrum for 3. Don't want to sacrifice our Scion. Alright, lands is good, so we can discard these two. And next turn we can reanimate one of those two. Attack for 1, we'll just take it. So this is interesting, what we want to get back. So Omnath seems pretty sweet. As we could also... Well, this probably changes things, since casting Miasma here seems pretty good on this board. So we can Telling Time plus Miasma. So that's fine. Rise is fine. And I guess we'll also take the Mountain. And then we get to cast Miasma, using our Scion token to get rid of the opponent's board, leave him with 1 Scion, and then we can just reanimate next turn. Since we have a lot of time here, still at 16 life. And even our opponent killing a land here doesn't do it, since we're gonna draw a Mountain. Brood Butcher. It's gonna bring along some Scion tokens. But I think we're gonna get back our friend Omnath. And I think we do it with Rise from the Grave. And we also get to play land to make an elemental. And if our opponent kills Omnath, we'll just get it back again. And 5/5 nicely survives Languish, even though I don't think our opponent would have Languish in his deck. Bone Splinters, however, seems logical. So we get to deal 3 here, because of the death trigger. And Flashback gets our token. So now we get to do it again, although now we don't get to also make a token in the same turn. So I think we'll just go with Alhammarret here. And our opponent has seen the writing on the wall. Opponent can't cast a priest. And we'll pause a turn. Next turn we are safe from another Flashback Marauder. As our opponent casts another Butcher. Alright, sweet. Evolving Wilds is perfect with Omnath. So we get to hit for 7. Arise from the Grave. Or Omnath. And get 2 elemental tokens right away. And get a swamp. And it's gonna be pretty difficult for our opponent to get out of this one. Blister Pod is fine. And another Thrall. Alright, another Evolving Wilds. Let's do this before attacking. And yeah, let's go to combat. Opponent trying to soften the damage here, but yeah, it's gonna be difficult. So Omnath deals 3 damage. And I guess we can Pilgrim's Eye plus Bitter Revelation. Let's Revelation first. And get these. I think we can actually draw the Breaker of Armies. And then put Ulamog in a graveyard. And play Pilgrim's Eye. Getting a land. And pause a turn. With our opponent at 5. Opponent can still activate the Foundry here to make 2 blockers. Jace is a nice draw, but let's just attack and call it a game. Alright, sweet. I wanna thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this gameplay. And as always, have a nice day.